Welcome to the Wisdom Circle. To subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast platforms, please visit us at www.thewisdomcircle.com.
Marty, I think you heard us before you came on, and if you didn't, I'll just set it up a little bit, that we were talking about the next generation of people, the younger generation of people that seem to be looking at things more of this life balance of work and play. Play may be too strong a word, but just their leisure time and making availability for that. Do you see that, and how do you guide young people to make sure one doesn't outweigh the other to keep the fulcrum sort of balanced?
It's a great question. And personally, I love it. I think it's much healthier than certainly than how I came up, or probably how you came up. You know, we were working with an inverse formula there. And it was what it was. It's the time. Right. And so I definitely think that what the result of this, of people just being very mindful of who they are. So there is a self-awareness there that is very heightened. And also really what's going to feed into there's a huge sense of purpose here behind work. Work now, younger people in mid-career, even us boomers who are left, right? We're really driven by, much more than we ever were, a values-based decision on where we're going to work. So if that work isn't going to give us back something psychically, in addition to our dollars, we're just not that interested. And I give Gen Z, the millennials, Ys, all those generations have paved the way for this thinking. And I believe that ultimately, number one, that's going to make the world a much better balanced place in which to work. But I also think that it raises some interesting issues, because there is friction between how you bring yourself to work. So are you bringing yourself to work with an expectation of maximum productivity? Or are you bringing yourself to work with a different sort of an expectation? So I think in this discussion, the most important variable is productivity, and really understanding how you test for that and get productivity from your people. How do you do that? You do it in creating much more collaborative environments and work environments, places where setting up a place where you can ideate. That's really what people want to do, to connect and come up with new ideas. That if you can start to create ideas for yourself, you're much more likely to be invested in how they roll out and how they become ultimately part of a business plan or part of a leadership plan.
So how does the hybrid workspace play into that whole concept of collaboration, measurement, and understanding who you have and what they're capable of? Do you feel that because we're boomers who grew up face to face in conference rooms on subway cars in the back of a taxi, don't get it, that the ones who grew up working out of their dining room or their living room, or they come to the office once in a while, that they actually get that because that's their ecosystem? Ours was different. Doesn't make it better, just makes it different. Like, are you finding the productivity still hits or better?
I'm finding in most cases the productivity hits. The difference here is that, and I'm sure everybody knows and has heard that Amazon has called its workforce back for 5 days a week. So they've decided that this is not a model that's going to work for them. I think that the hybrid model is here to stay. I mean, it just is. It's a determinant factor. It's going to drive the level of skill you get. And it's definitely one of the few leverage points that people who are looking for jobs have. Right? So if they're skilled and good at what they do. So it is what I'm saying to answer that is that in a hybrid work environment, you have to work really clearly and prescriptively to create the interactions. Whereas if you're in an office all the time and there's a big break room and you're just hanging out, walking by the break room or down the hall or whatever, those things might happen organically. And so the places where I've seen have been really helpful for fully remote teams are getting together for deep dives, like 7 days, to even 10 days, about 4 times a year, to just really connect and really get into the meat.
You mean like
the work.
7 to 10 days we're going off to a...
We're going off. I mean, it's a really valuable thing. And I've seen a lot more companies, even if they're doing a 2-day offsite or a 3-day offsite, just get into that very deep connection of who the humans are in the room. Typically, if 20 years ago you're doing an offsite, it would be very work focused. Here's our issue. Here's our challenge. Here's how we're going to do breakout groups. We're all going to come back with ideas. We're going to rank them, blah, blah, blah. Right. Call it a day, get a work group. Something might happen. Something might not.
5 o'clock
Here,
somewhere.
the difference here is that the focus is on the connection, at least with the facilitations I run, the connection of the teams to each other as people in order to come up with new sets of ideas. So it doesn't lead with the challenge or issue, it leads with the connection. And that is the one thing that I'm seeing that's the biggest difference now, especially in the hybrid space, that employers need to really focus on. How are we creating those conditions for people to be together, to connect, and to come up with good ideas and collaborative work plans?
Yeah, that's fascinating, because that's the first time I've actually, and Tony, I'm sorry, be short, quick, and throw it right back.
No.
But no, it's a total, like, kind of, if you put people together long enough, they really do bond. And then when they go back to their hybrid life, they've made those connections that would carry through. And I don't think I've ever actually seen, like, if you do that 3 or 4 times a year, so let's call it 3 or 4 weeks out of 52, you can actually have a very productive hybrid workspace for the other 48 or whatever. It's fascinating. No, it's cool. Never heard. Yeah. Tony, your take on it.
No, and I'm going to walk down a plank here, Marty, so bear with me here. But
is it with the intention of us pushing you in, or is it intention of us pulling you back?
Me walking right over the plank here. So one of the things, and Ray's heard me talk about this, is, I really believe in, obviously, a equal workforce, male, female, ethnic diversity, everything. When I was at Anheuser-Busch, we had women in, very key jobs and did our best to have diversity. And so I believe in it to the utmost. I understand that when talking about our seesaw again, the seesaw got to this way with, call it white male. So we had to bring it back. But you could argue, and this is the plank I'm now walking down, that it's gone back like this with it, so that now a 32-year-old white male will tell you that it's very difficult to get a job. People say, I need a female, I need a diverse person. No thanks. So now we have the other problem. And whether people would be sensitive to that, as Ray says, we had our time, but it's not fair to the 32-year-old. We had our time, we're 70 years old. So how do you, if you're advising at all these companies in this way, can we get, and I'll use Sports Business Journal since you're in the business as well, and they do a game changer. Here's our game changers. Well, the game changers are all female, right? And it's like, well, what about the guys that are gay? Why can't you have a mixed game changers of male and female? Why does it have to be all female? So this is the plank I'm walking down. But how do we get to a point with companies and leaderships to say, we want to mix, and let's try to keep it balanced and not go one way or the other to make up for 20 years of bad hiring.
100.
Right, and it's a great question, and I get it asked this all the time, and my answer to it is, with any correction, whether it's in a market or whether it's with an institutional cultural change that we're making, what tends to happen with Americans, I'll just say with Americans, right, is that we love big action, right? I mean, we love it. Somebody said DEI, and boom, overnight, there were 5,000 DEI consultants.
Right.
They should have been around for the last 50 years. Okay, so we like big action. So what happens is we get these giant pendulum swings. And so we started out here in not a great place. And then we swung out here. And we are finding, as employers, employees, and markets, because we are in a market-driven society, we are finding our water level. If you notice, it's starting to get less and less broad in terms of how the swings are coming back. Yeah. And I do think we will arrive eventually at the right place, a better place, a healthier place, a place where we are more attuned and pay more attention to the composition of our workforce, to what they bring culturally, what they bring in terms of experience, and of course, skills. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. But I will tell you from talking to recruiters, they get a lot of mandates all the time. Yeah. I want a diverse work pool. I want this. I want that. I want that. Sometimes they can field it. Sometimes they can't. The reality is are you looking at skills and value, or like what are your determinant factors? And I think employers are starting to come around to that as well. And it goes back to the earlier conversation of productivity. But the shortest answer to it is that our pendulum is still swinging back and forth, and we haven't found our new resting place. But when we do, as a workforce, it will be a better place than where it was. That I can say with absolute authority.
With you. Yeah. And the other element to this, now I'm really going to age myself. I don't think Ray's ever heard this comparison, but I call it the Ron Swoboda. Is that name familiar with Ron Swoboda effect?
Ron Swoboda.
I don't even know who that is.
Marty, I'm as lost as you are. I can't wait.
Take me down the path, Tony. So I can't wait to hear this one.
was played for the New York Mets. Was brought up from the minor league after about 3 months because he was going to be the superstar. Never really became a superstar because they brought him up too early, and he didn't get the development that he should have in the minor leagues. So going back to the point, because I've seen some situations to meet those objectives, and I thought you answered that pendulum thing great, is trying to move people up for promotability, but they're really not ready. And then they've gotten fired. So now someone's 35 and they've just been fired, but they were brought up too early, the Ron Swoboda effect. And so that's something of concern as well. So
it happens. No, it does happen. It does happen. And this is why, in performance management, it's managing against the skills, but it's also really being clear about which competencies you're managing for. And if the candidates that you're considering promoting, if they're not at par with their competencies, if they're killing it on the skills, but they're not there on their competencies, if they're moving up into a management role and they're being tasked with managing people, they're going to have a harder road of success there. Yeah. And, it's unfair to set people up for failure that way because you want a good PR talking point.
Exactly. Ray, take us home. Take us home after that.
Yeah, wow. Ron Swoboda, I was trying to come up with a Yankee and they did the same thing. So I was thinking of Ronnie.
Like Googling this guy.
Who played first base, but we'll have to take this offline. So, Marty, as I told you, it was going to be chock full. We're going to have you back. But let's get one of the many questions we talked about so that our audience can Google Ron Swoboda. They can Google Ron Swoboda, and then maybe they can learn something too.
There's a lot of Googling going on there.
So half the people are trying to figure out how to spell it.
Right.
So I'm gonna make this a dealer's choice. You pick the question you want to answer. It's all I'm asking to is feedback, how to give it, how to handle it, and how to act on it. And or if we have time, the art of listening, because I think both of those things require listening, right? But how would you answer those two, and then we'll call it a weekend. But seriously, this has been so much fun. Go with that, please.
Okay, all right. Two things. So I can leave all of your viewers and listeners with two mechanisms, actually, two tools. So this is great. Okay, let's do listening first. Since this is a podcast and some people will actually listen to it and watch it, then let's start there. We tend to listen in three main ways. We listen filtered listening, which is typically what 90% of us do 95% of the time. I'm hearing the words that you're saying, but when I'm hearing them, I'm actually thinking about what I'm going to say next, and I'm already have formed my opinion. So I'm not letting things really get to the fruition. I'm really very concerned with what happens next from where I sit. Okay, that's number one. That's kind of how most of us act most of the time. Empathetic listening, and we've all had this when we've had team members come in and they're upset, and you want to try to understand why, and you want to kind of get to it. So that empathetic is really suspending your filter and looking at the situation from that other person's view. And we do that, but it's not terribly shared. You're really taking yourself out and transferring fully into that other person. So that's another type of listening that we tend to do. But where we're really trying to go is a place called dynamic listening. So dynamic listening is understanding that empathy piece, but being able to read where the conversation is going and bring it to a productive end or a productive outcome. So that's where we're really going. And it's a matter of when we're having a conversation with someone, if you start to hear your internal voice, turn it off and just hold the thought, put it at bay, and really start to focus on what am I seeing? What am I hearing? What's the inflection? What's the body language look like? Where is this likely to go? Do I need to really lay out 2 or 3 scenarios before I jump in with what I think or based on my experience or, X, Y, and Z, which we would typically say. So those are just the 3 modalities of listening that are helpful for people because it gives them a mechanism to say, oh, I'm hearing the voice, I got to turn it off. Or I am so far in the other person's world that I don't have the perspective that I need. So that's number 1.
Right.
Number 2, tool number 2 is this is my favorite feedback model ever because it is so easy. We remember things in 3s and 5s. That's just how we organize. So this is a 3, which makes it even better.
Good. We need a 3.
Yeah, 3 is better than 5. But if pushed, we can get to 5. Right. So this is called the situation behavior impact model of feedback. And the reason why it's beneficial is because oftentimes with feedback, if we do get it, it's way too general. It's not actionable. It's this amorphous, mushy mass. We have no idea what to do with it. Oh yeah, you were really great in that meeting. Or, yeah, you're not such a good team player. What does that mean? I put some meat on that bone. Yeah. So what situation behavior impact does is it forces the person giving the feedback to understand that, number 1, if they're going to go down this path, there is a shared responsibility that at the end of this conversation, there will be shared accountability in either making an improvement or continuing the behavior. So the situation is specific. This is what I saw in the meeting on Tuesday. Okay, you're taking me back to a point in time. So now I can understand if it's a constructive piece of feedback, we'll just focus on that. I can understand, oh, I came into that meeting, I was so I was just hot. I'd had 15 coffees and it was not a good day. So right away, you can start to understand where you came into that meeting. The person giving the feedback, this is what I saw in that meeting. The behavior is there because there's always an interaction. So the behavior is that caused a lot of frustration in the room. There was a lot of anger. People were shutting down. That's what happened. But this is the key, the impact piece. So it doesn't become emotional and it doesn't become personal. The reason why this is an issue is because now it's going to push back our timeline on XYZ deliverable, connecting it with a business reason. And that's where you can start to move that piece of feedback into an action plan using open-ended questions. So what are your ideas for changing this? How can I help you? Where's the best place to start? So questions that begin with what, where, when, and how versus why. Because why takes us back to second grade. Why didn't you do your homework? Right? It has a defensive response to it. Exactly. So following that up with open-ended questions can then really move that person into a place where they feel a lot of autonomy to create a plan that's going to work for them to actually improve, rather than you saying to them, well, do it this way or do it that way. That generally doesn't work long term. So we're talking about behavioral change versus she told me I had to do it that way, so that's how I have to do it. Yeah. So those are just two tools that are very helpful. What I like about them is that anybody can use them.
Right.
Because they've got that business component attached to them. They tend to be, I wouldn't say clinical is the word, but they tend to have a higher rate of adoption because it connects back to the work being done.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Not my first rodeo on those two tools.
Gold. No, I could tell. Listen, I don't think any one of the questions we talk about, except tell me where Ron Swoboda was born. That would be the
Pittsburgh,
only thing.
because that's my answer to everything.
That's very funny. Well, listen, this was great. We're not going to stop doing these, and we would love to have you back at some point.
I love it. This is such a great idea. It's been such a pleasure. I just think that this, going back to how you originally opened the show, never stop learning, never stop being curious. There's a lot of stuff out there in the world. It's just there's a lot of things to do. You don't just have to do one thing.
That's right.
At all. But this has been terrific.
Closing thought, or you good?
Well, just I want to bring you back so I can ask you some more strange questions, because you handle them so well.
Very poised.
Well, I think we brought you off the plank this time. Maybe the next time.
Next time I'm going to go right in. Yeah. But thank you, and we look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Marty.
Thanks, Marty. You too. Thanks so much.
All righty.